I have a question. Are the ancients overrated? In other words, do we overrate the classics and say then, well, they've stood the test of time? I suppose one could say also, there is nothing new under the sun. And so what was said 2,000-3,000 years ago is probably as good as today, as per philosophy and key insights about people in general, and religion. For consider, if this is a proverb, it has been said, there is nothing truly novel in existence. Every new idea has some sort of precedent or echo from the past. That's from Wiktionary. Well, if so, then, I suppose that would fit in rather neatly with those who say, your chances of inventing a better mousetrap are pretty slim, and you've probably self-deceived yourself if you think you have, and thus you've built something and they will come, kind of like that movie, The Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come to your better mousetrap. But some say that's almost impossible to build a better mousetrap. Christo has said that regarding movies, most movies being a rehash of previous ideas. And even Solomon from the Bible saying something to the effect of there's much making of books. Now, of course, too, it could be argued sometimes that what has stood the test of time are those authors, those sages, those religionists who get taught in schools through the eons because it is helpful to certain elements of a society to do so. And so, for that reason, more than most other reasons, it perpetuates. And what is said to stand the test of time are not those who are a blip on the radar and then disappear, but those who have their name engraved, so to speak, in one way, shape, or form, such that they are continuously appearing, say, in curricula through the eons. Same, of course, yes, for religions, certain ones. Now, I'm not referring to the underpinnings, spirituality, and what goes into that. That being, by the way, in my opinion, kind of a code word for something more. Now, I would actually ponder if someone 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, is considered today just as relevant in terms of degree of understanding of people as today, I would ask, well, what tools did they have to grow this profound understanding 1,000 or 2,000 years ago? Did they have modern means of travel to sample a lot of different types of cultures? Did they have YouTube videos or any kind of videos to watch, so to speak, a variety of people, such that you didn't only have to consume something in writing form, but you could watch the speaker who was speaking with words on paper originally and see what body language they were utilizing as defense mechanisms, particularly. That, of course, was impossible until lately. In fact, for instance, a psychoanalyst I knew 30 years ago took a special trip to New York City, 1,000 miles away, just to watch some film clips of Dr. Freud. Nowadays, the same film clips and more can be watched on YouTube, free of charge, too, without moving an inch from your chair. Also, Schopenhauer, the philosopher, urged us to know a lot more mathematics and linguistics. He said they're key. And several scientists or deep thinkers like Einstein and Stephen Hawking, the latter of which wrote A Brief History of Time and was a cosmologist, both had to stop right in the middle of their work, take time, and reinvent a new form of mathematics so that they could proceed further. So you have to wonder, even in Freud's time, whether he had a very good set of mathematical tools available at the time. For even calculus has been more and more clarified as to its principles all the time, so that it is easier and easier to understand as time goes by. When it first came out, calculus was probably rather abstruse, just as many things are, requiring in time clarity and clarification in general, which is largely the purpose for many writers, whether journaling or writing a novel or what have you. Mathematics, then, is the same thing. It evolves in stages as per, say, calculus in the 1600s, but then needs refinement as to the clarity involved to even understand it when taught, books or otherwise. So how can we understand somebody 2,000, 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, having the tools of keen mathematics for understanding very complex things, including people and their societies, etc., and religion, anthropology? Next, where was psychoanalysis 1,000, 2,000 years ago? It is said by some to be the royal road to the unconscious. Well, I would say some call it introspection and claim you can get introspection from writing, or that it is a form of intuition encouraged by an analyst. But you have to wonder, for instance, what Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie were talking about in their book, How to Own Your Own Mind, whereupon it was said one of the biggest difficulties in understanding things, or reality, shall we say, is how easy it is to self-deceive ourselves. Call it wishful thinking, if you will. And so, this pointed out, psychoanalysis is supposed to, in part, help us understand, at its best, how we deceive ourselves, how we rationalize things in general, our blind spots, call it, if you will. That, I believe, is one big reason why Dr. Freud was not always up to snuff. He claimed he had self-analyzed himself once a year. But that, difficult, according to Napoleon Hill and Carnegie, to do very, very well because of our penchant to have wishful thinking. And without someone else to make course corrections through, say, self-analysis administered to somebody else other than ourselves, that can be quite problematic, I believe. Finally, I'd point out that only in modern age times of the last 40 years has spaced repetition software been available to review a whole bunch of material we could be learning in an efficient manner. In other words, you might say before then we had paper-based systems, including flashcards, to memorize and review. But as Piotr Wozniak from Poland, a computer scientist with a PhD, has talked of, that's a very, very inefficient way to go about reviewing compared to the utilization of computer software, typically laptop use and desktop use. So all of these things, I think, comprise a way for me to want to scratch my head when somebody might say that the ancients have it best because they've stood the test of time. I would have to qualify then, which ancients do we even hear of, and which don't we, and why? may some of the best ancients have died out, their message and all, because it was not expedient to certain people to pass it on in academic or other channels. One might even say it could be expedient to some for there to exist for thousands of years venerated what you might call platitudes, like blatant or rather vague claims that we should simply be truthful and full of honor. And without exception, too, such as another phrase, thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not lie. Well, aren't there exceptions then to the rule? The venerated speech of such sages through the years and eons, supposedly passing the test of time, do not allow for any exceptions. And furthermore, might the mantra repeated in these areas be substituting for our looking under the covers to see something else more important, some 10-ton elephant? Hence even a psychologist having mentioned several years ago, a Jewish psychologist in America, that some people have a problem with compulsive honesty. In other words, there might be times when it's best to be deceptive. And that's found in nature, of course found in people, and it might be to our advantage at times. And yet, the venerable advice for 2,000 or more years is that one should never tell a lie. And there's even the advice given by certain political leaders through the years to the same mentality, such as what was said of George Washington and Lincoln. Finally, what about slippery slope ideas? It being claimed, well, if you give a little lie, pretty soon there'll be more and more lies, hence the concept of a slippery slope. But if you look at killing, so to speak, and of animals, you might find the Native American Indians, many or most of them, not wanting to kill animals very much at all, only under dire necessity, and then using every part of the animal and giving thanks afterward to the Great Spirit, as they called things. Whereas it was given a counterexample that certain white people on trains passing through the plains, say in South Dakota, would roll down the windows in the train in the 1800s and shoot buffalo repeatedly per person, just for the fun of it. And of course, not every body part at all used of the animals, none used, and no thanks given. The point being, you could say, this was done by a certain type of addict personality, whereas the Native American Indian never had a slippery slope problem with killing because they, in contradistinction, didn't have at that time nearly the addictive personality aspects to them. And that's why you could call them in certain ways minimalists, in other ways maximalists. So yes, mankind can get off track, mankind can get stagnant, but you would hope that in time we tend to inch forward, even if some